Jack Forrester hadn't planned to make enemies when he retired to Lakeside Hollow. A former Army Corps engineer, he just wanted quiet. The bridge he built, a sturdy timber and stone structure, was the only way across the narrow canal that separated his private lot from the main road. He paid for it, designed it, maintained it. No one else ever cared about that bridge until now. On a foggy Thursday morning, Jack stood barefoot on the gravel, coffee mug in hand, staring at a row of orange safety cones and two men in neon vests, dragging the last wooden plank onto a truck. He blinked twice, trying to make sense of it. "Excuse me," he said, raising his voice. "Why are you taking my bridge?" The older of the two workers, clipboard in hand, barely glanced up. "Just following orders, sir. Work order says this structure is unauthorized." Jack's blood cooled. "Unauthorized? That bridge has been there for 9 years." The man shrugged. "Talk to your HOA. We're just here to haul." With that, they tossed the final beam onto the truck, kicked gravel behind them, and drove off like they were late for lunch. Jack stood frozen. No notice, no inspection, no hearing. Just gone. That night, he walked down to the edge of the lake. The moonlit water shimmered under the stars, calm as ever. Across the lake stood the HOA's prize, the freshly built $1 million Lakefront clubhouse. Floor-to-ceiling glass, floating dock, palm trees, shipped in from Florida. It was a monument to their vanity, paid for by the homeowners, of course. Jack took a seat on an old log, staring out toward the far end of the lake. Right where the tree line dipped low, just past the cattails, sat a rusted steel grate and a weather-worn concrete slab. The HOA called it a runoff channel. Jack called it what it was: his dam. 3 years ago, they needed flood control. Jack offered to rebuild the spillway for free on his land, using his own designs. They had laughed, then reluctantly agreed. When their consultants failed to show up, they signed the agreement. Jack built it himself, and now they'd forgotten. The next morning, HOA President Karen Whitlow pulled up in a pearl-white SUV, wearing oversized sunglasses and a sun hat, and tapped on Jack's door like she was visiting a misbehaving tenant. "Hi, there," she chirped. "Just wanted to stop by and thank you for your cooperation. That bridge wasn't up to code, and we're working hard to keep the community safe." Jack didn't say a word. She looked over his shoulder. "Oh, and I hope you'll consider donating to the clubhouse pool fundraiser. We're installing heated jets next month." She turned to leave. "Be well." Jack closed the door slowly, then walked to his desk. He pulled open a drawer and removed a folder yellowed, thick, labeled Spillway HOA Agreement 2019. At the bottom, a page marked Flow Control Rights, Sole Operator, Jack Forrester. He picked up his phone and made a call, not to a lawyer, to a supplier. If they wanted a war, they were going to learn what happens when you tear down a bridge without checking who controls the water underneath it. What Jack does next makes the HOA beg for mercy, and it all starts with one lever hidden in the woods. Tap the next episode to see how a retired engineer turns the entire lake into his message board. 2 days passed. The HOA sent no apology, no explanation, not even a follow-up email. Jack's driveway remained blocked, and neighbors drove by slowly, some pretending not to notice, others peeking curiously over their steering wheels. He didn't wave. Jack spent those 2 days walking the perimeter of the lake, clipboard in hand, like a surveyor tracing a war map. He measured water levels. He checked the concrete seals. He reviewed every bolt, every gasket, every gate at the spillway. Then, early Saturday morning, just before dawn, he disappeared into the tree line. The lever sat inside a locked steel hatch, bolted to an outcrop, half buried in moss. Jack knelt before it, wiped away a thin layer of dirt, and unlocked it with a key no one else had seen in years. The hatch groaned as it opened. Behind it, a large brass handle stuck out like the wheel of a submarine. Jack placed one hand on the cold metal. He paused. This wasn't about flooding anyone. That wasn't his style. But a wake-up call, a reminder of ownership, that felt fair. He turned the handle halfway. A mechanical clank echoed underground. Nothing happened right away. The dam wasn't built for drama. But downstream, deep beneath the lake's surface, steel plates slowly shifted, just enough to allow a deliberate, controlled release of water. Something no one could hear until it was far too late. By Sunday evening, the lake level had dropped 7 inches, not enough to raise alarms, but enough to leave the floating dock at the HOA's clubhouse slightly askew. Karen noticed. She sent a group text to the board. Karen, anyone notice the water's lower? Probably evaporation. Still, it's July. Call the maintenance guy. That maintenance guy was her cousin Todd. He showed up in flip-flops and didn't even bring a depth gauge. He shrugged, blamed it on heat, and left. Jack kept turning the handle just a little every morning at 4:45 a.m. By Tuesday, the shoreline had receded by over a foot. The HOA's grand opening gala for the new clubhouse was just 5 days away, and the photo ops now featured patchy mud and fish skeletons. But they still hadn't connected the dots. Instead, Karen held a meeting, one of her infamous parking lot roundups complete, with catered muffins and branded coffee sleeves. "We're doing everything we can," she announced, standing in front of the half-submerged dock. "The lake will bounce back. In the meantime, please, no panic posts on next door. It's bad optics." One of the board members, Greg Walters, leaned in. "Should we test the dam valve?" Karen scoffed. "That old thing? Jack built it himself. He probably doesn't even remember how it works." From across the water, Jack watched them through binoculars. He smiled. That night, he returned to the lever. With a calm twist, he opened it further. This time the hiss of flowing water was louder. The old concrete pipes groaned to life as the lake began draining in earnest. By Thursday, local kids found they could walk halfway across the lake bed without getting their shoes wet. The HOA clubhouse, now surrounded by drying algae and warped dock planks that had cracked under the sun. Karen sent an emergency memo. Subject: urgent water update. Please remain calm. We're investigating the sudden drop. Our legal team is exploring options. Do not spread rumors. The board isn't full. Control. But control was exactly what they didn't have. On Friday morning, Jack got a knock at his door. Not a polite tap, a firm, repeated pounding. He opened it to find Greg standing there, holding a clipboard and sweating through his pastel polo shirt. "Jack," Greg started, forcing a smile, "I was hoping we could chat real quick, off the record." Jack didn't move. "About the bridge," Greg laughed nervously. "About the water, actually. Strange, isn't it?" Jack said, stepping outside. "One day you have a lake, the next, it just starts disappearing." Greg nodded stiffly. "We'd really appreciate your help. Karen's thinking of calling the county." Jack arched an eyebrow. "Tell Karen I'd love to help. Right after I rebuild my bridge, my way." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked back inside, closing the door without another word. Greg stood there, staring out at the shrinking lake like he was watching their Hoodoo circle. The drain, because they were. The whole played games with the wrong man. But what happens when the media finds out the entire lakefront was built on a forgotten deal? Click to watch what Jack reveals next, before the floodgates open literally. By Saturday, the lake was no longer a lake. It was a wide, round scar cutting through the heart of the community, a cracked basin littered with shopping carts, bicycle frames, and some bleached PVC pipes no one remembered putting there. Ducks wandered in confusion. Fish skeletons curled in the mud. The $2 million clubhouse, which once reflected proudly in the water's surface, now sat like a forgotten yacht stranded in a field of silt. The floating dock had settled unevenly on one side, slanting like a sinking raft. Karen refused to go near it. From his porch, Jack sipped black coffee and watched HOA board members shuffle across the empty shore, with clipboards, phones, and clip-on sunglasses. They looked like tourists stranded at the wrong campsite. Jack hadn't said a word publicly. He didn't need to. The lake did the talking. That evening, Karen called for an emergency board meeting inside the clubhouse. Only 5 of the 9 members showed up. The others, quietly ashamed or wisely absent, claimed family emergencies. Inside, tension hung heavier than the humidity. "We can't just let him do this," Karen snapped. Pacing near the display fireplace, "The lake is HOA managed. This isn't medieval times." Greg spoke up from the back, "But technically, the dam is on his property. We gave him full authority in an agreement. I read it. I signed it." Karen spun around. "That paper was from 3 years ago. Still valid?" Greg replied flatly. "It had no expiration clause. It even says, we waived inspection rights." Karen's jaw clenched so tight it looked like her cheekbones might crack. "And what about liability?" asked Cheryl, another board member. "If the lake stays dry, property values drop. We're already getting angry emails. We can sue." Karen said, "On what grounds?" Greg shot back, "That we tore down his bridge, and he exercised the right we gave him." "I don't think a judge will sympathize." Karen stared out the large clubhouse window. What she saw wasn't just mud, it was exposure. The lake had always been the board's crown jewel, the backdrop for every social post, fundraiser, and holiday flyer. Without it, the entire image of control cracked. "We need leverage," she muttered. "We'll dig." And dig they did. Karen ordered a full audit of whole records, minutes, contracts, everything. Her assistant, Linda, spent 14 straight hours scanning boxes in the back closet of the office. Then, buried under a folder labeled maintenance disputes, they found something, a single page. Handwritten draft of the spillway deal unsigned. Karen smiled like she'd struck gold. "Here it is." She beamed. "This proves Jack proposed the idea, but it wasn't official." Linda frowned. "But we have the signed copy from 3 months later." Karen's expression faltered. Still, she called a lawyer. Sunday morning, HOA residents woke to printed notices taped to their mailboxes. "Emergency town hall meeting, 7 p.m. tonight. Clubhouse, lake level discussion." Jack read his and chuckled. That night, neighbors packed into the stuffy clubhouse. Some stood, some brought camp chairs. All eyes were on Karen. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We want to reassure everyone that the board is actively working to resolve the lake issue. We have consulted legal counsel and are reviewing prior agreements for any irregularities." A hand shot up from the back. It was Charlie Mahoney, a retired contractor who lived at Lakeside Hollow since before the HOA was founded. "I remember Jack building that spillway," Charlie said, "and I remember y'all praising him for doing it without charging a dime." Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen tried to speak, but another hand went up, then another. "Is it true? We have no rights to the dam." One resident asked. "What happens to our dues if the lake's gone?" Asked another. A third. "Why'd you tear down the man's bridge without asking?" Karen's carefully managed grip was slipping fast. In the back, Greg leaned against the wall, arms folded, silent. Just as Karen opened her mouth to redirect the meeting, the double doors opened. Jack walked in, carrying a thick folder. Every head turned. He made his way to the front and stood beside Karen. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. Jack opened the folder, held up a sign and notarized agreement, and calmly placed it on the podium. "Page 3, he said. Clause 7. HOA surrenders all operational rights to the dam structure and downstream flow control. In exchange, the HOA may use the lakefront for community development." Silence. He flipped another page. Clause 12. Any damage or unauthorized removal of infrastructure provided by the operator may result in termination of shared use. Karen's face went pale. Jack looked up. "You tore down my bridge. You gave up your rights. And I'm just following the agreement. The one your board signed." He left the folder and walked out. No drama. Just truth. One signature can turn power into paper. But Karen isn't done yet, and what she does next might take the entire HOA down with her. Stick around for part 4. You won't believe what she tries to bury next. Literally. The next morning, the clubhouse doors were locked. A new sign hung on the entrance, closed for water damage assessment. Karen claimed it was due to foundation issues. The truth? The HOA board had splintered overnight. 3 members resigned in a group email titled "This is not what we signed up for." One even CC'd the local paper. Jack didn't need to say anything. He just kept the water gated half open, letting the flow continue slowly but steadily. By now, the lake bed was more weeds than water, and the once glimmering shoreline homes looked like they bordered a swamp. Real estate agents pulled listings. The property values Karen's pride and joy were hemorrhaging, but Karen had one card left to play. On Tuesday, she filed a cease and desist letter through an attorney, accusing Jack of malicious sabotage and environmental interference. The legal jargon was thick, padded with phrases like irrevocable disruption and intentional water mismanagement. She had no idea Jack had already anticipated it. He faxed his original engineering plans and a signed copy of the whole agreement to the county's zoning board 2 days earlier. The county's response? A 1-page letter that arrived on Karen's desk with a red stamp across the top. No violation found. Still, Karen refused to concede. Late that evening, she met with Todd, the same cousin who once shrugged at the lake's decline and took him for a walk near the old spillway. She brought a shovel. "What's this?" Todd asked, eyeing the tool like it bit. "I want it blocked," Karen hissed. "I don't care how. Sandbags, gravel, quick cement. I want the water to stop leaving." Todd scratched his neck. "You sure that's legal?" Karen grabbed his arm. "Do you think this whole runs on legalities or on image? Look around. They think I'm losing control. We fix the lake. We fix everything. But that's Jack's land," Todd whispered. "He's old. He sleeps like a rock," Karen muttered. They moved under cover of night. A wheelbarrow filled with bricks, sacks of dirt, and buckets of quicksand concrete was dragged slowly through the brush. Karen wore dark yoga pants and a hoodie. Todd wore regret dye at the edge of the spillway. They stood over the steel grate. A low but steady rush of water flowed underneath, feeding a thin stream that now looked more like a dry canyon. Karen crouched and dumped the first sack. Todd followed reluctantly. They worked for nearly 2 hours. By sunrise, they packed most of the intake pipe with a heavy slurry of rocks, concrete, and debris. Karen wiped her hands, breathing hard. Done. They turned to leave, not realizing Jack had seen them from 50 feet away, behind a tree, his infrared camera. Blinked silently, mounted 3 nights earlier. It had recorded every movement, every brick, every whisper. Back in his cabin, Jack replayed the footage, not once, not twice. He recorded the screen with his phone, then sent the clip to his lawyer, his county contact, and for good measure a journalist named Gwen Baker from the Lakeside Ledger. The story ran the next day. HOA president caught sabotaging private property to save clubhouse with stills. By noon, it was everywhere. Karen tried to deny it, calling it heavily edited. But by dinner, Todd had cracked under pressure and submitted a formal statement. Karen instructed him. Karen organized it, and Karen threatened his position in the HOA if he refused. Residents exploded. A petition to remove her from office gained 400 signatures in a single afternoon. The clubhouse's scheduled wine tasting was replaced with a recall vote. Karen didn't show. Instead, she locked herself in her lakefront house with the curtains drawn. The HOA had fallen into chaos. Emails bounced. The hotline rang endlessly. Contractors backed out of agreements. No one wanted to be associated with the sabotage board. Jack, he sat on his porch that evening, sipping sweet tea as a soft rain began to fall, and slowly, the lake began to refill naturally. He closed the dam that morning. No announcement, just a twist of the handle and a silent decision. The lake could come back, on his terms, and only if they earned it. The sabotage backfired, and the whole president is cornered. But Jack has one final reveal, and it's buried beneath the mud they tried to hide. Don't miss part 5. What Jack uncovers will change the entire neighborhood forever. By Monday morning, the rains had grown heavier, turning the cracked lake bed into slick sheets of mud. Puddles spread across the basin like bruises. The whole board had gone silent. No emails, no memos, not even a whisper from Karen, who hadn't Left her house in 3 days. Jack took a walk along the dam wall. With the release valve sealed and the rainfall steady, the water had begun creeping back. Slowly, steadily, the lake was healing itself. No cement, no sabotage, just time. But Jack wasn't there for the view. He'd seen something strange on one of his morning walks, a glint of metal half buried in the drying muck near the clubhouse dock. At first, he thought it was just trash, but the reflection was too clean, too deliberate. On Tuesday, just after dawn, Jack stepped onto the lake bed with boots, gloves, and a crowbar in hand. The mud was thick and unforgiving, pulling at every step, but he kept moving, each foot sinking with a wet suck. When he reached the object, he bent down and scraped away the grime with his crowbar. What emerged wasn't a can or a pipe. It was a locked metal case bolted to a concrete footing. Jack knelt, heart thudding. The box had a faded placard stamped with property of Lakeside Development Group minus 2007. That was long before the HOA existed, long before anyone remembered a development group. Using a socket wrench from his belt, Jack forced the lid open. Inside was a bundle of dusty, water-damaged blueprints, sealed in plastic. He lifted them out, careful not to rip the edges. Beneath them, an envelope, thick, sealed, taped 3 times. He opened it. Inside were deeds, permits, and letters, real ones, notarized, signed by contractors and developers who had once owned the entire lake and surrounding plots. What caught Jack's eye was a clause dated October 2007. If any structural alterations are made to the dam or lake bed without written permission from Lakeside Development Group, all subsequent HOA claims to water rights shall be nullified. Jack blinked. That clause meant something profound. It meant the HOA's claim to the lake, something Karen had touted for years, was rooted in a forgotten transfer that never fully closed. They didn't own the lake. They never had. Back at his cabin, Jack spread the documents across his table, drying them with a hairdryer and cataloging every line. By noon, he emailed copies to his lawyer. By 3 p.m., the story hit the local news again. Leaked documents reveal HOA never had legal control of lake. It exploded across community groups like a wildfire. Angry residents demanded refunds. Some called their banks, questioning years of dues and fees. One man reportedly drove his riding mower in angry loops across the clubhouse lawn, shouting about being conned. Greg, the last active board member, called Jack. Jack answered after one ring. "You've seen it all, haven't you?" Greg said. "The box, the clause." Jack didn't say yes. He didn't have to. Greg sighed. "I'm done. I already turned in my resignation." Jack was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's not just about you all tearing down my bridge. It's about pretending the rules don't apply to you." "I know," Greg said softly. "And Karen, she'll face it, one way or another." Later that night, Jack stood once more at the dam. Water now reached halfway across the basin. The moonlight rippled across its surface like nothing had ever happened. But everything had changed. That evening, a knock echoed on Jack's door. It was Gwen Baker, the journalist from the Lakeside Ledger, holding a camera bag and a notepad. "I want to do a full interview," she said, start to finish. "How you built the dam, what the HOA did, and what this place really stands for." Jack hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. "This neighborhood was built on a lie," Gwen said as she sat. "But I think it's time folks saw who built the truth." Jack nodded slowly. Not to brag, just to finish what he started. The bridge was just the beginning. Now the lake's legal truth is out and Karen is about to face more than angry neighbors. Stick around for part 6, because what the county uncovers next might end her reign for good. By the time Gwen's article hit the front page, the county had already begun its own investigation. The headline read, "Local HOA's lake control exposed as illegitimate. Private owner silence until now." The piece laid out every detail. The torn-down bridge, the block spillway, the 2007 deed locked in a box beneath the clubhouse dock, and most damning of all, Karen's midnight sabotage attempt caught on Jack's camera. Photos circulated fast. News vans showed up, parking just outside the HOA gates. One bold reporter even knocked on Karen's door, but was met with silence and a porch light that clicked off mid-sentence. Inside, Karen paced in circles. Her phone vibrated non-stop emails from realtors, texts from board members, voicemails from the county zoning office. Her carefully curated HOA empire was crumbling in real time. And then came the knock. Not the kind of knock Jack used to give the polite, neighborly sort. This was sharper, harder. She pulled open the door to find two county officials in polos and khakis. Behind them stood a man in uniform, deputy clerk from the sheriff's office, Mrs. Whitlow. One of the officials began, "We need to speak with you regarding illegal alterations to a privately owned spillway and misuse of HOA authority." Karen's lips twitched into a strained smile. "This is a misunderstanding. I acted in the best interest of the community. We'll determine that," the deputy replied. "But we have video evidence of you trespassing and tampering with water control infrastructure on non-HOA property, and now we're opening a full audit into your board's financial records." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the official cut in. "You're not under arrest yet, but we recommend legal representation." Word spread quickly. By dusk, a crowd had gathered near the lake, now refilling fast. Jack stood among them, quiet, steady, unnoticed at first, but then a voice rang out from the crowd. "You did all this, didn't you?" someone asked, not with anger, but odd. Jack turned. It was Charlie Mahoney, the contractor who'd backed him weeks ago. "You brought the truth up with the water." Others nodded. One woman clapped. A teenager nearby recorded it all on his phone. Jack didn't smile. He just gave a small nod and said, "I just wanted my bridge." The next day, the county issued a public statement. Ownership and operational control of Lakeside Hollow Central Lake belongs solely to Jack Forrester, based on documentation recorded in 2007 and affirmed by the HOA's 2019 agreement. The HOA's actions to modify or restrict water flow without consent constitute multiple violations under local code. That same day, a second letter hit Karen's mailbox, this one from the HOA's insurance provider. Coverage suspended. The grounds for it were simple: gross misconduct, unauthorized infrastructure damage, and misrepresentation of land rights. She'd gone from president to liability in less than a week. Karen didn't leave her house again. Meanwhile, Jack walked the lake's edge, alone, watching the water slowly creep back into its basin. Birds returned. Frogs croaked again. The dock realigned as the lake reclaimed its shape. Then Jack spotted something strange: a group of kids planting wooden stakes along the west shore. He approached, and a young woman, Sarah, a high school senior he vaguely recognized, looked up. "We're mapping out a kayak trail," she said. "Heard you own the lake now. Wanted to ask permission." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You asking me? Like, actually asking?" She smiled. "Yeah, isn't that how it's supposed to work?" Jack considered it, then nodded. "Keep it clean. No motors. And if Karen shows up, paddle fast." The kids laughed, but the message landed. That night, Jack opened a blank folder on his computer and titled it, "Lake Use Requests Reviewed by Owner." He wasn't doing this to be petty. He wasn't interested in ruling anything, but someone had to care for the lake. And clearly, that wasn't the HOA anymore. Karen's collapse was public, but the HOA's secrets aren't done spilling. In the next part, Jack finds something buried that not even the county expected, and it changes the neighborhood's history forever. Keep watching. This lake still has one more secret to reveal. 1 week after the county confirmed Jack's sole control of the lake, things began settling, at least on the surface. The water had nearly reached its original level. The clubhouse remained closed. The whole board was gutted, with no one volunteering to fill the vacancies. Karen's house sat dark. Her lawn, once manicured down to a science, now grew wild around plastic flamingos leaning sideways in the wind. But Jack still had questions. That metal box he'd found near the dock, it had blueprints, but one page had stuck with him more than the rest. It wasn't a diagram of the lake or spillway. It was a rough topographical map hand-sketched of the entire area, and in the bottom left corner, behind a line of red X, was something marked only as, well site number 3, reserved. Jack hadn't seen anything that looked like a well, but something about the placement tugged at him. He pulled up an aerial image of the area from a decade ago and overlaid it with the map. His heart skipped. That marker was located right beneath what was now the HOA clubhouse. He grabbed the documents again, cross-referencing signatures. Lakeside. The development group hadn't just owned the land, they had geotechnical reports on file. Jack had access to them now. One line stood out. Potential subterranean reservoir, natural aquifer depression. Not to be disturbed without geosurvey clearance. His eyes widened. The lake didn't just sit in a pretty basin. It rested above something deeper. Something no one had touched until Karen ordered the clubhouse foundation rebuilt 2 years ago. She'd insisted on expanding the basement for a wine cellar and party space. They'd blasted bedrock. Jack remembered the noise, the dust, the contractors in hazmat suits. He also remembered how the lake's natural refill rate slowed after that. Jack made a few calls. The county water authority sent a specialist to test flow pressure. At the dam, results came in strange slow turbulence. From beneath, a regular draw at the base of the spillway. Jack asked for sonar scans. On Friday, the county engineers dropped sensors into the water. The scan took only 15 minutes. When they looked at the screen, both men fell silent. Below the lake bed, under a thin crust of sediment and stone, sat an ancient water chamber, a natural underground spring. Partially collapsed. Someone had cracked through the top layer, and that someone had likely been Karen's expansion project. Jack stood there, stunned. If they punctured the wrong side or sealed it improperly, it could explain everything. The lake's instability, the uneven refill rate, even the strange gurgling sounds that started after the rain. The engineer pulled him aside. You might want to keep people off the water for a while. If that chamber gives way. Jack nodded. He didn't need more details. That night, he walked to the edge of the lake and placed a large wooden sign himself. Nitrogen monoxide trespassing waterway under review. Private property. Then he made one more call. Gwen Baker. By Saturday morning, a new article hit the press. Leaked HOA expansion, cracked hidden aquifer, entire lake at risk. The twist hit harder than any bridge or sabotage. The HOA hadn't just mismanaged the community. They'd unknowingly built their signature structure atop a fragile natural system and nearly destroyed it. Residents were furious. Karen's house for sale. Silent listing. Rumor was she'd moved in with her sister 3 towns over. Using a different last name, the county issued a formal request to have the clubhouse shuttered indefinitely. Insurance companies pulled back again. Realtors crossed Lakeside Hollow off their maps, but Jack wasn't interested in revenge anymore. He was too busy working. By Sunday afternoon, he met with an environmental restoration group. He walked them around the lake, showed them the maps, told them everything. And when they asked why he was doing this after all the lies, fines, humiliation, Jack simply said, I don't care who did what. This lake doesn't belong to a boardroom. It belongs to the land. I'm just here to keep it breathing. They offered to assist grants, volunteers, permits. Jack accepted on one condition: the lake would remain private, but his future would be shared with those who asked, respected it, and didn't take shortcuts. The HOA cracked the lake open without knowing it, and Jack found the truth hidden under their arrogance. But in the final part, everything comes full circle, and a new legacy rises where the clubhouse once stood. Don't miss part 8. It's not just the end, it's a new beginning. 6 months later, Lakeside Hollow looked nothing like the place it used to be. The manicured facade had faded, the control, the gossip, the endless rules printed on laminated signs, they were gone. So was the clubhouse. The county had condemned the structure after a final geotechnical report declared the ground beneath it unstable. A private demolition company tore it down piece by piece. Residents gathered to watch it fall. Some clapped, others just stared silently as the walls that once symbolized HOA power crumbled into the mud they had buried their secrets in Karen. Never returned. The house she once guarded like a fortress sold at a loss. No one saw the moving trucks. Some say she left in the middle of the night. But Jack, he was still there, still walking the lake perimeter each morning, clipboard in hand, dressed in flannel, boots, and calm purpose. The dam had been reinforced. The spillway now monitored with new sensors donated by the local university's hydrology team. A solar-powered gauge recorded water levels in real time. And Jack wasn't a lone dot after Gwen's final piece titled "The Bridge That Saved the Lake." The story had reached far beyond Lakeside Hollow. Conservationists reached out. Engineers offered support. High schoolers volunteered to help replant native grasses along the shore, and one neighbor, Cheryl, the former board member who turned on Karen mid-scandal, showed up every Sunday morning to help Jack clean debris from the runoff ponds. They rarely spoke, but when they did, it was meaningful. One Sunday, Cheryl approached with a folded letter in her hand. "What's this?" Jack asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "A motion," she said, "signed by over 50 residents." He raised an eyebrow. "To officially disband the HOA," she continued. "We're voting next month. Thought you should know." Jack took the letter and looked it over. The names were real. People who'd stayed quiet for years. People who once looked the other way. Now they were signing in ink. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said. "Neither did we," Cheryl replied. "But your bridge gave us one." Jack glanced toward where the old bridge had once stood, now replaced by a newer structure. Dealt with community labor, stronger, wider, inaccessible. A kid had even painted a mural on one of the supports, showing a tree growing from a cracked dam. That mural said more than words ever could. Later that evening, Jack sat at his kitchen table reviewing permit requests. Not from a board, from individuals. One neighbor wanted to host a paddleboard clinic. Another asked about building a small gazebo for wildlife viewing. Jack read each one carefully, made notes, and responded with either a yes, a no, or a condition. Respect, not revenge. That was the only rule now. Around sunset, he walked to the far shore and watched a group of kids launch kayaks into the calm water. Laughter echoed across the lake, bouncing off the trees like it hadn't in years. As he turned to leave, someone called out, "Hey, Mr. Forrester." It was Sarah, the girl who first asked to set up the kayak route. She waved a thank you card in one hand. Jack waved back, still paddling every weekend. She grinned. "You coming out sometime?" Jack chuckled. "One of these days, maybe." As she turned back to the water, Jack stood for a moment longer. The lake shimmered behind her, full, peaceful, alive. It no longer belonged to a board or bylaws or a file cabinet full of fines. It belonged to those who respected it. To the land. To those who asked. To those who listened. Jack never needed power, just peace. But when the HOA tore down his bridge, they also tore down their own illusion. And from that collapse, something better rose. If you've ever faced a bully with a title or stood up for what's right even when it cost you, hit subscribe. Because stories like Jack's remind us the land remembers who cared for it.